Finally, after 4 trips to fill up the thing, I came back and I said, Dad, no more tea. I'm sorry, we're out of tea. And he said, what do you mean we're out of tea? I said, the toilet's empty.
In July 1991, the man millions of children trusted as the purest symbol of innocence was caught with his pants down in an adult theater, and the world never looked at Pee Wee Herman the same way again. The mugshot that flashed across every television screen in the summer of 1991 still hangs in the collective memory like a fracture in a once unbreakable glass. Paul Reubens, the man the world knew only as Pee Wee Herman, sat in a Sarasota County holding cell while the character he had built with obsessive care collapsed under the weight of a single charge of indecent exposure. 3 years after his quiet death from cancer on July 30, 2023, the full shape of that fracture and the deeper cracks that followed have settled into clearer, colder light. Reubens was born Paul Rubenfeld on August 27, 1952, in Peekskill, New York, the son of Milton Rubenfeld, a former pilot who flew for the British Royal Air Force, the United States, and later helped found the Israeli Air Force, and Judy Rubenfeld, a teacher. The family moved to Sarasota, Florida, when Paul was 9. There, surrounded by the lingering glamour of the Ringling Brothers Circus winter quarters, he discovered performance early. He appeared in local theater productions with the Sarasota Players and the Asolo Theater Company while still a boy. After a year at Boston University and studies at the California Institute of the Arts, he joined the Groundlings improvisational troupe in Los Angeles. It was inside that laboratory of odd characters that Pee Wee Herman first took shape in 1978, a nervous, grey-suited man-child desperate to amuse and perpetually failing in the most endearing ways. The character grew with startling speed. Stage shows at the Groundlings led to a 1981 HBO special, then the 1985 Tim Burton-directed film Pee Wee's Big Adventure, which turned a cult figure into a national phenomenon. 2 years later came Pee Wee's Playhouse on CBS, a Saturday morning program that mixed surreal puppetry, gentle lessons about kindness, and a visual style that felt both nostalgic and defiantly strange. The show earned 15 Emmy Awards. Merchandise flooded toy aisles. A star appeared on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Through it all, Reubens maintained a rigid boundary. He almost never appeared in public as himself. Interviews, talk show visits, even red carpet moments occurred in full costume and voice. The separation was deliberate and absolute. Fans loved the illusion. Colleagues later observed that the line between creator and creation had grown dangerously thin. That illusion shattered on the night of July 26, 1991. Undercover deputies from the Sarasota County Sheriff's Department observed Reubens inside an adult movie theater and arrested him for indecent exposure. The mugshot that circulated the next day showed a long-haired, bearded man who bore almost no resemblance to the clean-cut figure children knew. Networks immediately pulled reruns of Pee Wee's Playhouse. Merchandise disappeared from shelves. Endorsement deals evaporated. Public reactions split between those who felt betrayed by the contrast between the character's innocence and the circumstances of the arrest and those who argued that a private act in an adult venue had been weaponized by a culture hungry for fallen icons. Reubens pleaded no contest, paid a modest fine and court costs, and agreed to produce an anti-drug public service announcement. The legal penalty was light. The professional exile was near total. For more than a decade, the industry treated him as radioactive. Occasional supporting roles appeared, Spleen in Mystery Men, a brief part in Blow, but the dominant narrative remained the 1991 arrest. Then, in November 2001, a new investigation reached his Hollywood Hills home. Acting on a tip connected to a separate case involving another actor, police executed a search warrant and removed a large quantity of materials from Reubens's extensive collection of vintage photographs, films, and kitsch. In 2002, he was charged with misdemeanor possession of material depicting a minor engaged in sexual conduct. The case moved slowly through the Los Angeles courts under tight restrictions on public access to documents. In March 2004, prosecutors agreed to drop the child pornography count in exchange for a guilty plea to a lesser misdemeanor obscenity charge. Reubens paid a $100 fine, accepted 3 years of informal probation, completed a year of counseling, and was required to register as a sex offender for the duration of that probation. He was also prohibited from unsupervised contact with minors during that period. Once the probation ended, the conviction became eligible for expungement. Reubens consistently described the seized items as part of a long-standing historical and artistic collection of erotic photography and memorabilia. He denied any sexual interest in children and stated publicly that the accusation of pedophilia was the one label he could not accept. His attorney, Blair Burke, framed the prosecution as overreach driven by political ambition and cultural panic. Supporters pointed to the eventual dismissal of the more serious charge and the minimal sentence as evidence that the case had been inflated. Critics focused on the admission, recorded in court, that certain images met the legal definition of obscenity involving minors, and argued that the plea itself confirmed a serious breach. The debate never fully resolved. Court records remained limited. Public understanding stayed incomplete. The second scandal deepened the isolation that had begun in 1991. Yet Reubens continued working in smaller capacities. He hosted the short-lived game show You Don't Know Jack. He returned to the stage with the 2010 Broadway revival of the Pee Wee Herman Show. In 2016, he starred in Pee Wee's Big Holiday for Netflix, a gentle, road trip comedy that felt like a quiet reclaiming of the character's original spirit. He appeared as a guest on late-night programs and maintained friendships within the entertainment community. Those who knew him described a private man who carried both the joy of creation and the permanent bruise of public judgment. He never married. He kept his private life closely guarded. In the final years, he worked on a memoir and cooperated with a documentary that would eventually be released posthumously as Pee Wee as himself. He also fought 2 forms of cancer in silence for 6 years. On July 30, 2023, he died at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles of acute hypoxic respiratory failure secondary to acute myelogenous leukemia and metastatic lung cancer. He was 70. The statement released after his death asked the public to accept his apology for keeping the illness private and expressed lasting gratitude for the love he had received from fans. Tributes arrived from across the industry. Many focused on the inventive brilliance of Pee Wee's Playhouse and the lasting influence of a character who had given permission for strangeness and kindness to coexist. Others acknowledged the darker chapters without attempting to erase them. The documentary that followed offered Reubens' own reflections on the cost of living inside an alter ego, on the loneliness of fame, and on the difficulty of separating personal identity from public myth. 3 years later, the conversation continues in quieter rooms. The 1991 arrest remains a textbook example of how swiftly a carefully constructed persona can be dismantled by a single evening's choices. The 2001 investigation and its legal resolution remain a more complicated marker, one that raises unresolved questions about the boundaries between private collecting and criminal possession, about the fairness of celebrity prosecutions, and about the limits of public forgiveness. Reubens never offered a full public accounting that satisfied every critic. He also never disappeared completely. The work he left behind, the films, the television series, the stage shows, still circulates among new generations who encounter Pee Wee without the full weight of the scandals attached. For those who remember the full arc, the figure that remains is neither pure icon nor simple cautionary tale. He is a gifted artist who built an indelible world of color and absurdity, and a man who, twice, watched that world collide with the unforgiving machinery of law and public judgment. In the end, the story settles into a long, unsettled quiet. The bow tie and the red bicycle and the secret word still evoke laughter for many. The mugshot and the court filing still evoke something colder for others. Between those two poles lies the actual life of Paul Reubens. A life of invention and concealment, of sudden ruin and stubborn continuation, of private suffering kept out of view until the very last day. Fame magnified every contradiction. Death has not resolved them. It has only made the contradictions permanent. The secrets that once lived behind closed doors and sealed court files now form part of the permanent record, not a spectacle, but as evidence of how thoroughly a single human being can be both celebrated and condemned by the same culture that once claimed him as its own. 3 years after Paul Reubens left this world, the laughter he once created still echoes, but so do the shadows that followed him. On Faded Stars, we do not chase easy judgments or cheap outrage. We sit with the full, uncomfortable truth of a man who gave millions of children a colorful, strange, and kind universe, only to watch that universe shatter under the weight of 2 very public falls. The 1991 arrest and the later legal battle did not erase the brilliance of Pee Wee's Playhouse, yet they forever changed how the world could look at the man behind the bow tie. Fame lifted him high and then dropped him hard, leaving a legacy that refuses to settle into simple categories of hero or villain. In the quiet that remains, we are left with the same questions that haunt so many faded stars. How much of a life can one character consume, and how much forgiveness does a complicated human being deserve once the lights go out? Thank you for walking through this story with us. If these hidden chapters of once bright lives matter to you, stay with Faded Stars. There are more names, more secrets, and more unfinished endings still waiting to be told.